What's happening, guys? In this video, I want to cover some fundamental string writing tips. While this is a massive topic that I could kind of make a whole course on by itself, I want to touch on some of the most crucial mistakes and most common mistakes that I hear both inside and outside of this course, and how you could potentially fix them. So I'm not going to overwhelm you with too many things, but if you focus on these key areas, I think your string mockups are going to become a lot better. So let's look at the first issue. So when you are orchestrating, or recording, most people go into a library, they pick a patch, and they just go at it. They just record whatever comes to mind. And sure, that can work in a lot of scenarios, but what a lot of people do as a mistake is to think of the instrumentalist as the same thing as a patch in a library, which is just not the case. A real violinist, for example, can switch between all kinds of articulations in the blink of an eye. Patches don't really exist in real life. They're just meant to, have different categories for you to choose from. And too many people kind of get stuck with one patch for whole musical passages, while a real instrumentalist would very likely switch between different articulations in one single passage. So mistake number one is to only use legato patches. So let's listen to what that sounds like. So that's a little musical phrase that's only recorded with a legato articulation. And while it sounds okay, it's probably not how a violinist would play it. I'm a violinist myself, and I kind of did a quick mock-up here that switching between short and long articulations that's layered together kind of create more realistic representation of how I would personally play it, which is more like this. So that's a mix between short and long articulations, kind of creating better phrasing. Let's listen to the old one again. This is basically just a long string of notes. Here you suddenly have a bit more accents and a bit of more phrasing. And if we zoom in, I have used a short articulations, a staccato articulation to kind of accentuate the main notes. And then in between, I've used legato notes to kind of bind some of them together. And this is creating a little mix of the shorter and the longer notes. That's one example. And the same thing kind of goes for staccato articulations as well. A lot of people just go ahead, and if they have any kind of like short string parts, it's usually just most people, when they're recording short strings as well, it's usually just while a real violinist would probably have a little bit more of a variation. While a real violinist probably would have a bit more of variation. So let's listen to two differences with this little pattern that's played only in staccatos first, then a little mix of that and a legato patch. And now a blend of legato and staccato. So that suddenly sounds a little bit more realistic. And of course, this is not the perfect mock-up. I have just tried to kind of get this point across and get you to understand the difference between them. And a lot of the work here is basically just, first of all, the mindset of trying to emulate a real player and not just using a patch and recording that, but just as much having the patience to just sit and kind of tweak each note so it sounds more like what a real violinist would do. Let's just listen to the difference one more time and then move on. Let me just play like a little horn melody as well over that, just to give it even more musical context. Let's see. Very rough, but you kind of get the idea. The strings sound way more alive and less robotic in the background. So let's summarize. The first mistake and how to fix them is just using one patch, where a live instrumentalist probably would have a combination of short and long notes. And the way to fix that is to put yourself into the place of the instrumentalist and have the patience to tweak a mix of legato and staccato patches, or whatever patches fit what you're going to do the best. All right, let's look at my next tip. One thing that I see a lot of people kind of overcomplicate is combining different string sounds. A lot of people, when they're trying to get a big, lush string sound, they try to add in as many elements and different melodies or different voices as possible. But actually, one of the most effective ways to get a massive string sound is to layer the strings in octaves. Here I have a little string melody over these chords, the same chords as before, that is layered in 3 octaves. We have a main violin octave above in violins as well, and then an octave below in cellos. And this is resulting in a massive kind of soaring Hollywood sound. So sometimes when you want a really big melodic statement, just simply layering strings in octaves can give you really big results. The string instruments have a very rich sound, and when you layer them in octaves, you really get some beautiful, beautiful, lush statements. Let's move on. Another problem I see quite often is that people only use sustain, legato, and staccato patches. For example, with strings, you can do so many things. You can pluck the strings, you can use the back of your bow, you can do tremolo articulations, you can play closer to the bridge, you can play on top of the fretboard, and all of these things are going to give you different results. So I've opened Albion 5 here, which has a lot of very interesting string articulations, and just show you kind of different options that you have. So for example, you have flautando articulations, which are very lush and soft. Which are going to give you a very different sound and texture and also expression than just normal sustains. Or we have these brushed sol ponticello articulations. This is playing, very close to the bridge and giving a way more raspy, harsh texture, which can be really good for more tense scenarios, or even trailers, for example, or an action scene. And here we also have a concertino patch, which is playing with a mute, which is going to give a much warmer, rich sound. If you move over here, we can check out some of the pizzicatos as well. Then we have collegno, which is playing the violin with the back of your bow, the wooden part of the bow, and hitting it on the string, which is resulting in a very snappy sound. That's all of a sudden a very different articulation and very different expression that you get from playing the string instruments in that way. Then we have more pizzicatos. All of these articulations are going to give you different colors to play with when it comes to creating orchestral music. And I think people are leaving out a lot of ways to express themselves and to make music that stands out by just sticking to the most basic articulations. So what I recommend that you do is go through all these articulations in your libraries that you very rarely use and try to see, okay, maybe this can fit for this kind of situation. Maybe this could fit for that kind of situation. And sometimes you'll find these little happy accidents that can really take your new song to the next level. Listen to how lush and beautiful that is. So start exploring and getting more familiar with different articulations than just sustain and staccatos. Now let's move over to the next issue that I often see. And I've just taken a sustained string patch from CSS here, and I've just played a little 4-chord progression, and it sounds like this. So this in itself is the issue I want to talk about. First of all, way too many people record their harmonic parts in just root position and just play it into some kind of ensemble patch, and that's their harmony. And the issue with this is not how an orchestra works whatsoever. And this sounds literally like someone is playing chords on a synth with a string sound, which is what's happening. But there's so many ways to fix that. And one place to start is to work on the voicing. So each of these notes are going the shortest way to the next chord, which I'm explaining in the chord voicing lecture. And you can just move these like an octave down so they're closer to each other. All of a sudden it sounds more like this. Or you just work on it in the beginning. But this is like the way if you're not really sure how to use inversions, you can do it in root position and then take certain notes an octave down until they're quite close to each other. And here I've just done it from scratch and made sure that the voicing is, going the closest way to the next chord. But it still isn't that great because we're still just recording something into a string sustain patch, which might be good, or it's usually good when you're just sketching or playing around with ideas. But if this is your end result, it's not going to sound extremely realistic. It is good for sketching and playing around, but I would not leave things like this and hit bounce. There's one thing that you can do that's just immediately going to make it sound a lot better, and that is simply taking each of these 4 voices and splitting them out into individual tracks. Simply giving the lowest one to the bass, the next one to a cello, the next one to a viola or violin, and the top one to another violin. I just used 4 tracks here because there's 4 notes in this chord progression. And by just doing that, first check out the MIDI of this one, and then we check the MIDI on this. It is identical. So I've literally just transferred this MIDI onto 4 separate tracks and listen to the difference. reason this is so important is that a string section consists of many different human beings that each are playing in their own group of instrumentalists. For example, the cellos, the violin 1, violin 2, the violas, and the basses. They're not a string patch. They're individual people playing individual parts, and just recording them slightly differently and with their own phrasing is going to emulate this way closer than a sustained patch ever can. So those are two things that I want you to focus on as well. Work on the chord voicing and then make sure you split each voice into their own track with legato or whatever articulation you want to be using. So let's quickly recap. The first issue I want you to work on is where it is sensible to do so, try to switch up the articulations you're using to emulate a real player. This can go for legato parts or more short string articulation parts. The next thing is focus on simplicity when it comes to string arranging. Sometimes all you need for a melody to stand out more is not to add more elements into it, but simply reinforce it over octaves in the strings to get a large, lush sound. The next thing is work on getting more familiar with the different articulations you have available in your different libraries and use them, because it's going to give you more creative expression and, really take your tracks to the next level and make it sound more professional and like you're actually understanding the orchestra you're playing or writing for. Final thing, work on your chord voicing and split things up to sections that emulate the real orchestra a bit closer. That's the basic string tips I have for you right now, and I'll see you guys in the next video. So that are some of the most fundamental but really effective string tips I have for you guys. I'll see you in the next video. Welcome back, everyone. In this video, we're going to look at brass writing, and more specifically, brass writing tips. And as with the strings, one of the most common issues I see and hear are that people are just limiting themselves to maybe a couple of articulations. Either they're just writing legato lines or staccato lines. And that is just like the tip of the iceberg of what like brass instrumentalists can do, because we need to remember again that the libraries we're using are just representations of the real musicians and orchestras that are actually playing these instruments. And there's so many ways to play a brass instrument, and there's so many types of expressions you can get out of one. So you're kind of just really missing out and wasting a lot of the potential by just using a couple of articulations. So the first tip again is get familiar with the different kind of articulations you can get out of a brass instrument. For example, you have a mix of short articulations and different crescendos. And clusters like that. All these things are going to, give your tracks a different kind of feel. And some of these crescendos you can use to ramp up tension in action scenes or use them almost as risers into the next section or beat in your tracks. You also have all these different types of short articulations. And using a mix of those is going to give you way more realistic results, just as with the strings. And you have different variations of the sustains here. This is from Arc 4, by the way. So I'd recommend playing around with all the different articulations. This is just from the trumpets. Let's get something else here as well. Go down to Arc 4. Let's go for the horn. And so here as well we have some of my favorites, which are rips. These are all different articulations that you can experiment with and use in your tracks in different ways. even the different short articulations have a different feel to it. So using and combining these ones are going to give you a much more realistic result. So combine all these things and you're going to get a way more realistic and interesting result. It's going to get way more fun as well to start orchestrating and exploring these different things than just limiting yourself to a few common articulations. Now, the next issue I see a lot is that people forget that these are real instrumentalists playing. So what I mean by that is they just write long lines like this. And anyone who either plays a brass instrument or are familiar with how they actually sound when played live realize that no one can play that because you need to breathe. So you need to, like, in order to create a realistic brass arrangement, you need to account for the fact that they're actually using their breath to generate the sound of their instrument. So that you will have to make phrases and breaks for them to actually catch a breath. So a more realistic phrase could be something like, stuff like that. The breaks don't have to be like necessarily that long because people can, catch a breath quite fast. But one way to kind of train yourself or a little exercise to make this more natural is to actually hold your breath or breathe out while you're playing. And when you need to breathe, you kind of know that the instrumentalist would have to breathe as well. So that's another tip I would like you to keep in mind. Make sure that brass instrumentalist or the virtual instrumentalist in your arrangement has the ability to breathe. It's going to make it sound way more human, and it's also going to make you think more about the phrasing. So you're not just like playing lines that's just going all over the place. You're thinking more about the actual lyrical phrasing of it. Stuff like that. So that is another tip. Now, another little thing I want to touch on is that a lot of people are using brass in a very one-dimensional way. And what I mean by that is only using it for, very heavy accents like this. Or, big kind of Brahms like this. And not really realizing that these horns play also very soft chords. So experimenting with the softer side of brass is also very rewarding and fun because they have a really warm, lush sound. So here we have this patch called Air. Which is literally blowing air through the instrument. And these articulations make you think about that these are actual instrumentalist playing. So they can do whatever they want with these instruments. And some libraries are utilizing this, others not as much and focusing on the main articulations. But whatever you have at your disposal, play around with all the different ways you can express yourself through these instruments. So depending on which libraries you have, there might be more options for you than you would have realized to play with the different sides of brass that's not necessarily super loud and super intense. So I recommend that you, even if there's just a normal sustain patch, like what I did before with just a patch from Nucleus from Audio Imperia, play around with the different expressions of brass instruments, also on the softer side. Because sometimes you can actually, layer it with strings or choirs and get some really beautiful thickening effect. All right, let's move over to the final tip or mistake or problem area, you can call it, that I see. And that is simply using brass too much or kind of overusing it, especially when you use it in a very powerful way. So let's look at some examples of where I've used brass more sparingly. All right, here I got the demo that I did for Nucleus by Audio Imperia, which is one of the libraries I'm using the most in this new update for the course. Now, when I'm playing through this, I want you to just pay attention to the way I've been using the brass. We start quite quiet and then we have a crescendo over here where the brass comes in, and then I just take out all the brass except for a little part of a solo horn here. Then I save most of the brass, especially the trombones and everything, until the very end. I only use the brass for the big crescendos. Otherwise, I just have a little mellow solo horn. So a common issue that I see a lot of times is that people use the brass and kind of waste the power of it too early, because when you introduce the brass, which is the loudest section of the orchestra, there's only so much further you can go from there because you've kind of used all the power you have. So just one simple way to increase the power of the brass is to delay using it or use it so sparingly that when you do use it, it really makes a big difference. Again, as you can see, this is the only part where I've used all the brass instruments at the very end, and that's 1 minute and 30 in. And the track is less than 2 minutes long, so it's at the very end, and it's making the climax seem way bigger than, it really would if I'd used all the brass from, say, around here. Let's listen to the ending again. So that's something I want you to keep in mind. Try to use the brass instruments quite sparingly, because when you use them, they're going to bring a lot of power, but it can also be abused or overused, which is going to diminish the effect it has. So those are some of the tips I have for writing with brass instruments, like general guidelines I want you to keep in mind when you're writing and when you're orchestrating, and especially when you're mocking up and recording your musical ideas. So let's recap quickly. Get familiar with the different articulations you have for the brass instruments. Not only staccato, legato, sustain, and such, but the different types of staccatos, the different ways that someone can play a short articulations on a brass instrument. The different rips, crescendos, and bends and things like that you can get out of them, but also the softer side of the brass instrument. How they can be taken all the way down and create beautiful harmonic beds, for example, not only super loud and aggressive parts. And the final thing I want you to remember is to use them sparingly, because they can be extremely loud, and everything works by contrast. The loudest parts only seem loud if there's any quiet parts to compare them to. And of course, make sure that you give them some space to breathe. That's all I have for now, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Okay guys, now let's look at some basic woodwind writing tips. So I have my Nucleus demo open here from the brass video, and I just realized this track is a decent kind of starting point to look at some ways that you can use woodwinds to enrich your compositions. And again, of course, I'll have to just state some of the more fundamental basic mistakes that we covered in the other videos as well. And you might have guessed it, it is not using all the articulations you have available as well. So some articulations that people maybe not use, not as often is trills, for example, which can, give a very magical effect. Stuff like that. And also not, only using, say, the flute and maybe only the flute and oboe, while you also have beautiful instruments like the clarinet with a much warmer round sound. And the bassoon. And I'd also maybe say that one of the key mistakes a lot of people do is not understanding the chord differences between these instruments. And you can read about that in the instruments part of this module, but I'll state it again. So the flute is the only flute instrument together with the piccolo flute, which works very different than, say, the oboe and clarinet. The clarinet is a single reed instrument, which is giving it a bit more of a round sound compared to the bassoon and the oboes, which are double reed instruments, and they both have a bit more of a nasal sound. Let's listen to that. The bassoon is similar but darker. But it's also really soft and velvety and beautiful in a different way. So I'd encourage experimenting more with the bassoon and the clarinets, because they're all different colors that you can paint your compositions with. So again, just as with other instruments, explore the different articulations and play with the maybe less commonly used instruments, especially in modern cinematic music like the bassoon and clarinet. Especially in a lot of the modern hybrid kind of things, they are not used a lot. Like that goes for woodwinds in general, but sometimes the only thing you hear if someone is actually using woodwinds is a flute or something. So, use it, because there's a lot of potential in this group of instruments. Now, the second thing is quite obvious based on the brass videos, and it is, not creating lyrical, realistic phrases that allows the player to breathe. So again, just, having it keep like going and going in circles. With no space to breathe, compared to and stuff like that, which is more realistic in giving the player more time to breathe. Don't mind the extreme reverb here, by the way. I just realized the send is like really high. Anyways, that is a couple of the things that I want you to think about first and foremost. Second, it is ignoring all the different ways that you can actually use the woodwinds to enhance your composition. So the most obvious way to use it is like here, using it as a melody instrument. But other ways that you can use the woodwinds instruments as well are as background kind of, fluttery, beautiful textures that thicken the orchestration and make it more interesting. Like, let's listen to this little combination of instruments here, which is the trills and clarinets and bassoons and oboes. So that's another way that you can use woodwinds. A third way is to double up, say, string patterns and things that you have. So this MIDI says violin runs, and it's because I just duplicated the MIDI over to flutes to give the string pattern a bit more of a warm, lush sound. Let's listen. So that's another way that you can use woodwinds. And then at the end here, I have had them duplicate the pitch percussion and the strings. Which is also a beautiful effect. Let's listen to that isolated. Here's some other ways that you can use woodwinds to add some more power and a bit of a magical kind of feeling to your tracks. So you can also create really beautiful harmonic content with them as well. For example, the bassoons can be really beautiful for this. And you can use all the woodwind instruments for that as well. And bear in mind that when I'm playing these chords now, it's way more bassoons that you can actually realistically play in the orchestra. I'm just using it as an example to show you the sound of the bassoon when used in a harmonic context. Alright, so those are different ways that you can use woodwinds to enrich your compositions. You also can use them for runs and things like that, little background textures like here. Those are all different ways that you can use woodwinds. So, with that being said, I hope that gives you a little bit of a better pictures of the different ways that you can use them. I would probably focus on some of these things in the beginning so it doesn't become too overwhelming. So let's quickly recap. You can use them as melodic content. You can also use them to double, say, violins or strings or other instruments by doubling the existing instrument with the tone color of either, say, the oboe, the flute, or whatever you feel like. You can create beautiful background textures or rhythmic patterns that thicken and enhance the other ostinatos or patterns that you have going on. Or you can use other articulations like trills and things like that to create really magical background textures. And as always, remember that they need to breathe, so create realistic passages that showcase, the human way of playing the instrument. That's all I have for you now. I'll see you guys later. Hey guys, in this video I want to go through some tips and techniques for choir writing and how you can utilize the choirs in your compositions. First of all, I just recorded a simple little progression with a sustained string patch. So nothing too fancy, but one of my favorite ways to use a choir is to really add like depth and character to these kind of soft passages by doubling the string chords with a soft choir. So I've taken it quite a bit down in volume and added a bunch of reverb to it so it sounds like this. And choirs tend to sound really magical when you have a lot of notes that are close to each other like this. So let's just try to record something really simple with this kind of sound over this chord and see the difference. Or here, I guess. Not perfect, but before and after, let's listen. Another way is by using it as a melodic instrument or by doubling existing ones. So let's just take this flute part and just put it in the legato one here. There we go. Suddenly we have a little choir passage. And we can just listen to that isolated as well. So there we go. Now the legatos are from Metropolis Arc 1, as you can see here, which is a great little all-around choir. And the sustains are from Nucleus by Audio Imperia. Now let's look at a more aggressive way to use choir, which I know a lot of you guys are really excited about doing. And I'll show you just some of the little things you need to keep in mind for that. So we have this little string thing here, staccatos. With some evident hits here. Let's see. Here we go. That's the choir. So now I'm going to go to the staccato patch, which is also Metropolis Arc. Which is really, really good for these kind of things. Now let me just record that and then we're going to discuss it a bit further after. It just makes it a lot more epic straight away. But what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go in and clean this up a little bit. So some of the problems you can face when using these kind of phrase-based staccatos and marcatos is that each sample might be a little bit out of time. So let me just quantize it first here. Means I need to move this. So you see, some of them are not, some of them are a bit slower. So you need to kind of just move them a bit. But Even if it's a little bit sloppy, it's still gonna sound really good. And you can add, a couple of these, maybe, a little bit further down as well. But that's the general premise of kind of doubling something that's already there. It's going to fatten it up. It's going to make it even more epic. And there's lots of ways you can use this, but the faster you try to play, it can be harder to make it sound good, because this choir sounds really good, but some other libraries that I've used, kind of start to fall apart as soon as you start to play faster passages. So sometimes it's easier to go a bit more simple like this. It all depends on the samples that you use and you have available. Now let's look at another little example that I just quickly put in here. This is just a few chords, and we are going to look at how to use the choirs to fatten up the chords and also double the melody. Sweet. All right, let's start with the melody, and I'll go down to the legato again. It's going to give us a bit more volume from the last example because that was very soft. Just pull it to about 0. And let's find a starting point, which is here. There. And I'll hit record. Suddenly it gets a little bit of a different expression here. Let's try to add some sustained choirs. Here we got nucleus again, sustains. Sounds like this. So I'm going to try to layer that over the chords that we got, which is A minor, E minor kind of with G as the bass, F major 7, E minor, and then E major. Go for that. And it's a bit overpowering, which can happen with some choir samples. So I'm just going to pull it down until it sounds a bit more balanced. That's a bit better. I might also automate it to come in a little bit more as well. So starting, a couple of dB lower and coming in. Giving a bit more of a realistic swell there. So those are a couple of ways that I like using choirs. You can use them to, double violin lines, woodwinds, create soft pads and passages. You can use them to fatten up like really epic staccato lines, or synths even, or, fatten up string chords. And yeah, there's, sky's the limit, but these are some of the more common ways that you might hear it being used, or that I'm using them myself. But for now, experiment with, softer choir passages, softer legato lines that can beef up different melody aspects, staccatos and marcatos, and, bigger choir chords. That's all for now. See you guys later. All right, everyone, it's time to have some fun with percussion. And this has been a highly requested topic. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to show you 4 or so of my top tips and principles for creating really sick percussion parts for your tracks. And these are going to be very tangible and easy to follow, and I've tried to simplify things as much as possible so that you can replicate it as easy as possible in your tracks. And as you can see, I don't have a lot of stuff open here. I only have my low drums, mid drums, and high drums. And what I'm using is all action strikes from Native Instruments, which is a library I know a lot of people have access to. So what I've done just before we get into it here is that I have a high layer where I have some tambourines, sticks, and another stick layer from the library. Mid drum where I have some toms and taikos and another tom there. And then I have the low drums. So it just looks like this. I'm just using the instrument patch from Action Strikes. I'm using the taiko massive ensembles. And just, using 3 from low, 3 from mid, and 3 from high. And Ableton just lets me put these in like an instrument rack just so it's not taking up too much space over here, which is really neat. Now, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to start with the absolute essentials. So this track sounds like this currently. So first tip that I have for you is to look at the velocity of what you're doing. So in front of us here, let's just expand this. We have like a super boring standard pattern. And where on earth is the actual MIDI? All right, so here we got a little string of notes playing this sound. Playing it in 8th notes, and yeah, you'll see. It is just not that exciting. It's all the same note and kind of, the same velocity for every single hit. So it's not really driving that much. It sounds quite robotic, and one way to fix that is to look at the velocity. So if you listen to this now, this is the exact same notes and exact same sound. The only difference is you see I have, I play this in by hand, so every single hit is a little bit different. But you see that I've accentuated the first beat the first hit of every bar. So it sounds, accentuated, it's driving, and all the hits in between are kind of a little bit different. This is something you can do manually, or that naturally happens if you're playing it in. But just look at the difference in the velocity. Here it's just all the same, and you can hear that. While here, it's almost like hard to believe this is the same sound. I can replicate this effect easily here. I'm just going to drag all this a little bit down to create a bigger effect and push up the first one on every 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Do that here, like that. Already that's a big difference. And if I take this one down a little bit as well, so there's kind of like a little curve. So these 3 hits are slightly different. Maybe take that one up. The more variation you have, kind of the better, because if all of these hits are slightly different, it's going to replicate the real effect of an actual human hitting the drum with a stick, because no hit is going to be exactly in the same spot at the exact same level of strength. So this is automatically going to make it sound way better. So this is what we had before. So already that is just going to get to a whole new level of, drive and groove. So first thing, deal with the velocity, either by playing it in with a keyboard or pads, which I prefer, but everyone is different. If not, go in and do it manually by making sure every single hit is a little bit different and that you have accents on the first beat, for example. Now, if you want to get a little bit more advanced and have some little bit more fun with this, then we're going to go into the next thing. So we're going to look at accents like these ones that are not on the 1 beat every time. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 3, 4, 1. So now let's look at some other options. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Let's listen to it. So the only difference here is that I've put the accents on like the offbeats. Because here you have, the main ones, 1, 3, 4. And this one falls in between. The ones we had before was this, that, this one, and that one. So what I've done is that I've put the accents like on different hits. And we can do that with our first one here as well. So the only thing I'll do is that I'll take this down to like a normal level. I'll maybe put one here. Maybe I put one here. We'll keep that one. This down. Maybe we one here just for, because we can, and one there. And suddenly it sounds like this. Suddenly you have a whole different groove, and you can just play around with this, either, you know, literally playing it in, or just literally moving things around and seeing what, you know, works the best and what suits your track the most. So the second thing I would like to do, or like you to do after you have recorded something, is to play around with where the accents are. Are they in between the main beats, or are they falling on the beat? Suddenly it sounds like this. So simply playing with the velocity is going to make such a big difference. So the reason I'm keeping this so simple and just using 3 tracks for now is because I want you to really understand the power of these principles and not thinking, oh, it's because of this library, it's because of this, it's because of that. This is literally, as you heard, just this thing changed, where I've changed the velocity and moving it around to different bars. So it's this effective. This is how simple these things are, but they really, really work. When I have, like, you know, lay down, I have all the same notes, just eighth notes, just, you know, repeated through the whole thing. Now, just at the end of them, I've kind of put in a little da-ga-da, like a little upbeat to the next section. And that sounds like this. And these little, you know, hits in between the hits are going to make it a little bit less predictable. It's also going to propel this section into this section. And you can just, like, you know, put this in anywhere you want and kind of see what sounds the best. I don't know what I did now, but let's listen. See, that kind of works. So you can just play around with that as well and kind of, you know, spice it up with some extra hits here and there. This is 16th notes, which is twice the rhythm that we have pulsing through the whole thing. So that's third thing that you can be playing around with. Let's go back and just do it to our first example as well, which is where we started. So to do that, I have everything set to 8th now, but I'll go to 16th. I'm just gonna, you know, put in some random ones basically. I mean, I usually have a bit more of a structure to how I do it, but I just want to show you that you can kind of do anything. And so on. It is not exactly rocket science, and a lot of this is just, you know, playing around and having fun. And that's kind of, you know, like a lot of the origin of percussive music around the world is, you know, people just playing, having fun, and communicating through rhythms. So don't take it too seriously. Play around, try to just, like, you know, whack in some different notes here and there. Suddenly you come up with something cool. So now let's just move on to something that's going to take this to a whole new level, which is the concept of layering. Because as you have seen, I've only used one track so far, low drum layer. So now, what I've done now is I've taken this, I've put it here, and I've just, like, you know, duplicated the exact same thing here, and the exact same thing here, only that I took away the little beats in between, because the high layer is better kind of when you have something very simple. So let's listen to that. Sounds way better. Let me just take away the 2 other layers in the first half, just so you can see the difference of layers and no layers. And I've done it quite simple here, because when you're layering, you need to have certain parts that play the low role of being the body, and then you have the mid layer, which can be a little bit different. That's more in the mid range, and then the high layer, which is like the piercing kind of high percussive layer that just keeps things driving. Let's listen to the difference. Sounds a lot more epic already. So that's the power of layering, guys. And the thing is that when you layer, you have to layer with purpose. And that's why I have one layer for low, mid, and high. I encourage that you do the same. So the layers that's on the high is just, a snare, tambourine, and stick. And for the mids, I have some toms. And then for the lows, the same as I showed you before. So they all fulfill a very specific role in the sonic kind of spectrum here. And that's really important, because if you layer too many low elements, it's all going to kind of fall apart. There's going to be too many conflicting frequencies fighting each other, and you're going to lose all of the punchy, groovy feel that you once had. All right, let's take this to the next level once again. Now what I've done here is that I've taken the same thing, I just simplified this to took away the 16th notes in between. The only thing I did here is that instead of having the accents the same spots as on the low drum, I changed the spot where the accents fall. So before, the mid drum was playing exactly the same as the low. But now they're playing the same rhythm, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, the same eighth notes, but the accents are on different beats. Listen. And when those two are played together, you get a very interesting effect. It starts to soundly be a bit more groovy. It's a little bit more interesting. And then when I add in the high element as well, which is just playing, straightforward 8 notes. We see this one too. The accents are on different spots than the low layer. So these are still playing the same da-da-da-da-da rhythm, but the accents that I've chosen to, fix with the velocity are falling on different spots. So that's going to give you another really cool effect. And you can change this to anything as well. I can take it, do like that, this one down, maybe have it up here, this one down, this one up, one down. You get the idea. There's no formula or anything or some secrets behind this. It's just about experimenting. That's a different groove. And we can play around with this one too. Just, up, this one down, these ones up, and suddenly sounds different. So play around with the accents after you've layered it as well and try to put them in different spots. It's going to give you a different feel. Now again, we're going to take it one more step further. And that is, instead of just having everyone playing the same kind of pace and rhythm, we're going to have them play different rhythms. So we're going to keep the low drum the same. But what I did with the mid layer is that I played something different. That sounds like this. And the high one is now twice the speed. Together, when we have the layering, we have different rhythms, different accents. It sounds like this. And this is 3 layers, guys. This is not rocket science. I haven't done any crazy production. This is just these 3 layers and working with very specific and very basic fundamental kind of principles of rhythm to make something really cool. And now when you have all these little, kind of building blocks, you can say, you can take the high one and build a little arrangement out of it. So we take this for once, then we get into this, then maybe at the end we get to that. And for the mid layer, we can start with that one here, and then maybe it gets more advanced here, and then going like that. And this one can come in, well, we can start with a simpler one actually, the one we did here with only the basic velocity. And can take one of these ones, or actually beat thing, and we just get to this part. We just like piece this together, and suddenly you have this evolving rhythmic arrangement. Let's listen. Alright everyone, those are my 4 most fundamental tips and techniques for writing percussion grooves. Even if you have just one library like this one, these are very specific and simple techniques you can use. So let's recap. We started with like the most basic of basic rhythms. I'm just going to try to recreate that. Just resetting the velocities. We started with this. We changed the velocity of all the hits and accentuated the first ones of every measure. Then we changed where these accents fell. So it sounds like this. Then we added in a couple of extra 16th notes to, drive it a bit more forward. Then we layered the same rhythm with the mid and high layer. Then we changed the accents of each layer but keeping the rhythm the same. And then we change the rhythm of each layer so they're different and, making it even more unique, percussive, and interesting. And combining all these different elements, we have itself a tiny little percussion arrangement. Enjoy. Hope that was helpful.
Welcome back everyone. By popular request, I have decided to make a little video going over my favorite percussion and rhythm writing techniques. Because rhythmic elements and percussion can be used in a wide variety of ways to enhance your musical cues. From light background elements to drive your cue forward, to hits and transitions, and all the way to dominance epic rhythms. Only your imagination really sets the boundaries for what kind of stuff you can do. But in this lecture, I'm going to take you through some of my favorite ways to use simple rhythmic elements to really bring my musical cues to a new level. Let's just get right into the first of the 3 things, which is light background elements. So a light background element can quickly add a bit more interest, drive, and movement to a piece. It might not be extremely audible, but you can definitely feel it. And such background patterns tend to be fairly simple, often just following the meter of the track, not drawing too much attention to itself. So if your cue is in 6/8, the rhythmic element might simply play 8th or 16th notes in 6/8, driving the musical section a bit forward. Now, if it's in 4/4, yeah, you still might want it to play 8th or 16th, depending on the activity and the rhythm and pace that you are looking for. Now, in terms of instruments, some good things to use for this is things that are fairly transparent. I like to use light and transparent sounds that are not really taking too much attention. If you're writing a very orchestral track, orchestral percussion instruments like sticks and light rattles and maracasses, for example, can be a good choice. And also drum hi-hats, light cymbal hits, light hybrid drum loops, and other similar sounds can be a great fit. Let's just go through some examples. So here I have some sticks from Action Strikes. And these can be nice to use as background elements as they are very light and transparent. These are some bamboo sticks, and these things don't really draw too much attention. So they can be very nice for these background rhythms that just drive things forward. So here, what I just did now, I just made a little chord progression with a simple melody that we're just gonna use to test out some of these techniques as we go now. So let's try to add a little, this kind of rhythm behind these chords. Let's check it out. Or you know what, first let's check it out without anything and then we'll add it, all right. Alright, super simple. Now let's take this little beat and add it behind it and see what happens. I think I'm gonna go for, yeah, a bit quicker, but very, very light and soft. Let's go for it. Okay, what I'm gonna do now is make sure that this is quantized, so it starts exactly at the beat, because this is a loop, so if you don't really nail the beginning time, it's gonna be off, and that's not gonna sound too good. Alright, let's give it a listen. I also like to use things like hi-hats from drums, which would sound like this. Or ride cymbals. Let's see what happens if it adds in some of that as well. Let's see how the performance turned out. Need to make sure everything is on time. Quantizing it to 16th notes, and everything was perfect actually. Nice. Alright, so those are the light background beats and rhythms that can give things a little bit more of a boost and a little bit just some drive without really adding too much to the track. Because if you just go full on with, let's say, these kind of drums, that might be super cool for later, but sometimes all you need is just a little background movement to make an earlier part of your track a bit more interesting. Another nice use of percussion and rhythms is to enhance and add impact to transitions between sections of your cue. This can be done with a simple drum hit as the new section begins. It can be, say, a massive drum roll that transitions into a cymbal hit on the climax and everything in between. So, a lot of times it might be hard to avoid losing energy when transitioning from one section to another. Say you're going from the first A section to the next A section, or anything like that. One way to make sure that a newly introduced song section starts with a boom, quite literally, is to add some kind of hit and some form of transition in between the sections. A combination of a roll or a swell into a hit when the new section begins is a very simple but highly effective way to give your track a little boost. It's not a very prominent way of using percussion, but it surely makes a huge difference in keeping the interest of the listener as the track is progressing. Even without any other percussive use, only enhancing these transitions might take your track to a whole new level. So, as we just did before, let's take another example here and try to add some rolls. So the first way of using hits and transitions is hits. And one subtle way to boost your song section is just add some kind of percussive boom or hit at the beginning of the section, and each repetition of a melodic theme. Optionally, you can do this every other bar depending on the feel you're going for. Such a percussive element can be something like a sub boom if you're going for something kind of subtle. It can be a bass drum or something like that if you want to stay within, traditional instruments. Or it can be a huge processed, trailer hit if you're aiming for a lot of energy. So now let's just insert some kind of hits into here. I'm going to go to Arc, and I'm going to take what's I think just called like the Arc hits, epic percussion hits. And this is what it sounds like. Now, we're going to start fairly subtle. I'm going to start with only a sub boom from Gravity. But I think I'm gonna do a hit like at the end and maybe in the middle or something, just to show you a few different ways you can use hits and transitions to just add some more power. So let's go for it. Sounds a bit off. Let's do this right now, actually. So I decided to take this down an octave because we have this low kind of gong that's nice for these kind of transitions, and then a bigger hit at the ending here. Now, I also want to find like a sub boom, and I think I have a boom here from Gravity right here. I'm gonna take it up next to the other stuff we're working on, and it's called Gravity. Sweet. I'm gonna take a little sub boom at the beginning and put it right there. I know the hit at the end might be a little bit too much, but let's just stick with it for the sake of simplicity here. So I just put like a little boom on each, like every 4 bars pretty much. So there we have hits. Now, where the real magic also happens is in the transition. So leading up to a hit, a form of transition effect can often be effective and make the transitions flow a bit better and not be too abrupt, especially when we have a kind of slow, chill chord thing going on like we do now. So for orchestral textures, a cymbal roll or a roll on some kind of bass drum can be a good choice, but for hybrid and more energetic textures, risers, bigger drum rolls, and whooshes can also be extremely great for this. let's have a look at a few examples where we can add some kind of roll to this. And I think I made ready some rolls from hybrid tools. And it's gonna sound like this. It's kind of like a whoosh. And I'm gonna make that lead into the new sections here. Add a couple of them, and I'm gonna make sure the last one is on time. That's more like it. Alright, so at this point we have both some rolls and some transitions here. This is just from hybrid tools. Called, just the taiko rolls here. Alright, sweet. So we have a few different techniques here now. I'm gonna go through one more, which is rhythmic patterns, of course. I mean, we haven't really been looking at very rhythmical stuff now, at least not very interesting, so that's what we're heading into right now. So we've been looking at some very simple ways to enhance our track. Let's have a look at some more prominent rhythmic patterns as a part of our compositions. The first step is to figure out what kind of feeling you're going for. Do you want something simple and driving, epic and in your face, like ethnic or industrial, or figure out where you're going. These things will make it easier for you to pick out the right rhythms and instruments for your cue. So let's try a few different approaches here. I can take I think these are some, dull drums. I'm gonna take the sticks and I'm gonna make a little drum beat going over this that's, kind of laid back but has a bit of activity. Let's give it a shot. Something just super simple like that. Just gonna quantize, make sure it's on time, and that should be it. So here I just had a simple background element, in the background with the 16th notes of my tempo, and I have some bigger drums doubling it. And I also outline the first and the third beat in every measure, making it more of a drum beat-ish feel. That said, the rhythm itself is fairly simple. It's just doom, ga, ga, so it's very, very straightforward, but it gives it a bit of drive. So to just find the right rhythm for you, I'm gonna suggest that you just play around. We can try something different here too. Let me just move this over here. Go with something like this, for example. Some kind of other beat with a little bit more activity. Let me see. Just quantize it and let's have a listen to that option as well. Alright, so we get the idea here. And we've already been talking in the rhythm sections, the rhythm lecture in the composition part about how to come up with these rhythms. So I'm not going to go too much more into depth in that here, maybe in a different video. But for now, I want to revisit one of these cues we've been looking at earlier and try to create some kind of cool rhythm for that. Something different than this boring little chord progression thing over here. So let's move over here and see what we have to work with. let's create something cool for this. Haven't planned anything for this, but let's just, you know, that's part of the fun. Let's just use what we have looked at in this lecture and create something. So, just as we did before, let's create a light background thing. Start with that and see how that kind of gives it a little bit more drive. I took away the piano ostinato now, so it sounds more like this. So it's moving a bit more slowly now, so it's time to add in some brushes here. Alright, let's give it a shot. I'm just gonna move this all the way to where it ends, which is here, I think, and just, you know, do it the easy way instead of just holding it down for a while. There we go. I'm also gonna do the same for the other sticks here, just to give it a little bit more movement there. And also I'm just gonna copy those little drum things we had going on in the early ones, so I don't have to record all that again and and waste everyone's time. There we go. And let's listen. Alright, you can hear how that little rhythm just adds a little more to what's going on here. Let's add in some rolls as well to just give it a little boost. Might be one in here if I haven't taken it out. No, we're good. We're good. Alright, so I have some rolls going on over here that I think I'll just copy to save us time. Okay, that's where we need it. So I'm gonna put it before as well, before we begin. And at the end, something just simple and easy. Sweet, okay. In addition, we can add some hits. And I think we might have the gravity. Yeah, gravity has some action going on here already. So let's just ignore that for now. Let's add in just some arc hits at the roll in the middle here. Alright, let's listen to this cue now after these extra little transitions added. Alright, adding a little bit of movement to that, but let's just move on to this one, which I believe is a bigger orchestration of the same theme, where we can go a little bit more crazy with some more interesting and bigger drums. Alright, and I think there might be some hits coming in here already, so I'm just gonna delete that before we begin, so we can do everything from scratch. Alright, let's listen to the rest. Alright, so that's that theme. So let's start just adding in some light background stuff here as well. Yeah, something like that. This is from Damage. As you might hear, I'm now playing triplets and not, just straight eighth notes like we've done before. So I have to switch this to triplet and make sure they're all lined up. And it seems like I did an okay job at the performance. Alright, now it's time to put in some arc hits. I'll do that over here. Some simple arc hits, just quantize, 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 and now I think I got some rolls here that I can just copy and probably just open up the filter a little bit here in modulation. There we go, and let's take that one too to do the same thing. Put it over there. And while we're at it, let's improvise some more rhythmical things as well, which is like step number 3. And now you'll go to the same drums, just keep it super simple. Went ahead and just recorded something there. Let's see what it sounds like. Actually, we're also gonna isolate this and listen to only what the percussion things are playing, because I'm gonna show you something really cool right now. So we definitely have a little groove going on here, but let's listen to that in isolation. Background rhythms, da 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 da, and then some rolls on basically every hit. I can take this one here too, and that's it. And I just added like a little rhythm that is fairly simple. It's based on the da 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 rhythm that's going on in the background, but you see I'm also accentuating the third and the first, like 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3 4. See, these are red. These are the most accentuated ones. 1 2 3 4. So you have it da 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 rhythm going on. So now, just as with orchestration, if you want to size things up, guess what to do? Add in new things or double what's already there. I mean, that's exactly what I do basically anytime I want to size up my rhythm. So instead of just throwing in a bunch of random things and making everything sound messy, build on what's already there. That said, the more percussion things that you have that fight against each other, it's going to be harder to mix. So less is more here. Let's say I want things to escalate in the second half. Maybe I want to try to also expand on this little ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta rhythm in the brushes with some bigger brushes. Or maybe these ones are better. And what I can do, I can probably just take this and, copy-paste and find the right area, and it's probably gonna work. I'm gonna introduce that part in the second half, which is about here. Say I want to further accentuate something, like make it even bigger in the last half here. Maybe I would like to accentuate not only the ta-ta-ta-ta, but the kick and the snare almost, the first and the third beat hits. So maybe I'll go to some kind of, maybe I'll go even to the, drum kit or something for now. Like, enhance that kind of kick drum, that boom, boom effects. Let me add some arc percussion in here. Same spiel, just quantize, and here we go. That's our little percussion thing. That's it. Let's listen to the percussion isolated. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. Now you've been getting a little introduction to 3 of my main ways of using percussion: light background rhythms, transitions and hits, and percussive rhythms, actual rhythms. And you can, as you see, as I've done here, you can combine all 3 of them, use 2 of them, or only one alone. Again, based on the kind of texture and character you want for your given piece or your given part of your composition. I hope this makes sense, and good luck with your percussion writing. I'll see you guys in the next video.